Hello, Fighters Guild. How are you guys doing today? I am back, and today we're going to be talking about something I'm seeing pop up on the Facebook groups, and that is outrage about BRIAR. I'm seeing claims that LSS made a mistake, that the game is no longer fun because of Chain and then BRIAR back to back in these metas. And I just want to address that because I disagree totally. And I think that maybe a different perspective can help some of these people with these issues. So first I want to start with the ban announcement. We had a ban announcement on the 14th and there was no changes. And I really agree with LSS on that because we have yet to see the New Zealand and Australian nationals happen. And I think it'll be really valuable for the Flesh and Blood competitive community to see how the more experienced players of the world, the New Zealanders and the Australians, approach a defined meta. I want to see how people like Cale McCreath, Matt Rogers, Nick Butcher really tackle the BRIAR meta, Oldham, Lexi, these new heroes after the deck has already been known. Because I think US Nationals, while it was an amazing tournament, there wasn't enough time in between the advent of the Lightning BRIAR deck and US Nationals for people to test. So we're seeing some skewed results. And I see a lot of people saying that as well. So that is not my opinion. It's kind of been touched on by a lot of people, but I wanted to then break down BRIAR and talk about why she is perceived as so good. Okay. And there's no denying it. She is a very strong hero. And part of the reason why is the built-in go again on her hero ability. And a lot of players target this as the true reason of her being overpowered, but I tend to disagree a tiny bit. So I think what really sets her apart and makes it strange for new players and hard to compete is when you don't have to pitch to play any of your cards, your 4-card hands are essentially a 5-card hand, if that makes sense. A 5-card hand of another hero, because every other hero has to pitch at least 1 card to play their cards. Usually in general, or swing their weapon. So BRIAR is essentially creating 1 virtual card of advantage every turn cycle. Now, when I first started the game and I was 2 or 3 months in, I thought I kind of knew the game. I was winning. I had a lot of XP. I was winning armories, winning matches, a lot. And I still didn't understand the game, but I thought I did. I was confused. I thought Flesh and Blood was a tempo battle, right? Haymakers back and forth, trying to steal tempo and then ride it to victory. Forcing your opponent to block where you get to make the attacks, making them have the answer, etc. And that is just unequivocally wrong. And thinking about the game in that way can lead to some disillusionment about the game and its fundamentals. Okay. So I think a lot of the outrage comes from that misunderstanding that the game is a tempo game, because you're never going to beat BRIAR in a back and forth tempo battle because of this 1 virtual card of advantage every single turn cycle. So now that I claim that that is what is putting her so far ahead of the other classes, how do we fight her on that axis? And that is taxing her with the frostbites or hand disruption, such as Command and Conquer, Pummel, Crippling Crush, Oaken Old, and Endless Winter, which is technically a tax. But so that's why we're seeing success against the BRIAR deck with these decks that fight her on that axis. And I think that a lot of players need to understand that. This is not a back and forth tempo haymaker game. This is a counter strategy game. Okay, if I know BRIAR's strategy is to go super wide and just deal chip damage all the way down to 0 and not block, you can fight on that axis and come out ahead. Okay, so you need to analyze what BRIAR's doing, figure out how to level the playing field, and that's how you win. against BRIAR. I do not think she's a problem. I think she has many bad matchups. I think that there's matchups out there that haven't even been discovered yet that are going to shine in the New Zealand Australian Nationals. I just want to say, LSS, thank you for no bans before that, because I think it preserves the integrity of the New Zealand Nationals as well as Australian. So Flesh and Blood is a game of inches. Okay. You guys have heard me say that before. Small margins and things like 1 arcane damage, or the $5 spring tunic counters, or a rune chant off of the Grass of the Arc Knight, or even something like not being able to block with Lightning Press. These are small margins that often determine a game. Okay. If you made one bad block can cost you the game. And that's why I say it's a game of inches. Okay. It all adds up in the end towards card advantage. And I think, generally speaking, the person who created the most advantage over the course of a match is going to be the winner. And that's why we see BRIAR kind of dominating, is because she's really good at generating card advantage in a way that isn't that obvious, such as Chain, when you're literally flipping the cards off the top extra. That's pretty obvious. That's card advantage. So BRIAR is creating card advantage, maybe even more so than Chain, because it's so consistent. So I also want to talk about this being a skill-based game. Seeing Tarek Patel and Michael Fang in the finals of the Nationals, when the week before in the Calling Cincinnati, they also fought each other in the finals, is a real extreme testament to how skill-based this game is. That's something unprecedented that we haven't seen from another card game just yet. And I'm really proud to say that happened. And I think Tarek and Michael, you guys are really leading the pack right now in terms of the United States. Congratulations to both of you guys. I want to talk a little bit about why aggro decks are actually good for Flesh and Blood, though. Okay, so a lot of people think that the hyper aggression is unbeatable, it's too strong, and that's because they're stuck in the tempo game, right? They want to do back and forth haymakers, and at the end of it all, whoever's the last one standing wins the match. That's just not going to fly against BRIAR, and I think that's the real reason why we're seeing an outrage on these community posts. So the aggressive decks, they kind of keep the setup decks and the control decks in check, right? And I think that's really good. That's why I say aggro decks are good. Fatigue as a strategy, while I agree it should be viable, I think it needs to have drawbacks. I think it needs to have weaknesses. And I do not think that the best deck, there's always going to be a best deck. The best deck should never be a control fatigue deck. I think that's extremely bad for the game. It's really not fun for people to play against, and it's not that fun to play in that style, even though I do it a lot and I kind of do like it. But you'll know exactly what I'm talking about if you ever try and employ a fatigue strategy against a new player. They are very excited at first, ready to play, eager to play. They feel like they're winning. They're doing all their attacks. They get to make big turns, big plays. And then that stops because they're out of cards. And you can, once that registers in the new player's head of what's going on, you can hear them get deflated and the enthusiasm completely disappears. And that's not fun. So I think LSS should do everything they can to kind of, and I think they are, and they do. And I think that's why Duskblade was printed. I think they kind of realized that Oldham is really good at fatiguing. And that is going to be a strategy, and they needed to have a counter for that, because right now the only counters in the game for that in CC are pitch stacking to the bottom of the deck, and that's good enough. But I think just a little extra tools to combat that is fine. But again, I personally like fatigue. I employ the strategy myself against BRIAR. Speaking of how to beat BRIAR, I use a pretty basic Kale McCreath mid-range list, and I employ a fatigue strategy. So I kind of weather out the storm, and I will, throw in some attacks when they have an off turn. But yeah, this is a Kale McCreath list. I only added the third null rune and the Heart of Find All based on his recommendations. So this is how I beat BRIAR. It's a fatigue Bravo with a Rampart. Um, so, but there is an issue at hand here, and that is the community split and the outrage that we see. And there's always going to be that. But I think, and this is my proposed solution. I want to wrap up the video with my proposed solution here. So there needs to be a dichotomy made, and not saying there isn't already, but it needs to be doubled down upon. So CC needs to be hyper competitive, balanced, exactly the way it is. See, CC is perfect. I think LSS needs to shine the light above it and say, this is hyper competitive. This is not a casual format. Okay. And then they need to take Blitz and do the same, but in the opposite direction. This is a casual format. And I think they need to be hyper aggressive with bans. Okay. Stagnation in card games is what creates unenthusiasm. So if the format stays the same for 2 months, that's just too long of a time for someone to stay interested in playing the same format week after week, fighting the same heroes, the same strategies, and all that stuff. So I think in Blitz, they need to be more aggressive with the bans. And, you know, every month on the 1st, they need to ban up the boogeyman, change the format. And that also creates incentives for competitive players to get in on the action at their LGS and try out the new format, test their mettle and breaking the new format. So I think that would be a plus for both sides of the community. And I know that the casual side heavily outweighs the competitive side that I consider myself a part of. I don't tend to play for fun formats or casual or anything like that. I'm 100% competitive. So, but I think the aggressive banning in Blitz would draw me more to Blitz, but I do like Blitz already. So I think BRIAR is fine. She has multiple counters. And the real issue is, you know, I get that casual players want to play their pet hero and be dominant and be competitive and win armories and stuff, but that's just not realistic. And I think that's good. So thanks for watching. You know, I know my thoughts don't really mean too much, but I would love to chat with you guys in the comments about your thoughts. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.